Hello and welcome to Creating Disciples with me, Austin Roberts. We are so excited to have you join us today as we are going to be taking a look at a text in the book of Acts. We're going to be looking at today specifically what it means to live within a Christian community. I think that the early Christians, the people who were around right at the inception of the church, might have some valuable lessons to teach us about community and what it means to live in a community. I don't know about you, but throughout my life and my time here on this earth, community is something that I value and find very important. In fact, I think there are a few examples throughout my life where community has meant a great deal to me. First, for instance, I think of my time at Walla Walla University. I spent 4 years there getting a degree, and there were great classes. I enjoyed my professors. I enjoyed the area. I enjoyed the Pacific Northwest. I enjoyed a great deal of things, the work, the school, all the fun things that went on there. And I have a great and deep love for that university. Yet despite all these good things that I really enjoyed and I really liked, I think I would say that none of those things altogether really completely capture the essence of why I loved Walla Walla University. I think really if I had to boil it down to one thing, one sole thing, here's what I would say. I would say that the reason why I loved it so much was simple. It was the community. While I was there, I built lifelong friendships and relationships with people who I will know for the rest of my life. We did many, many things together. We built strong bonds and connections that are deep and wonderful. So I think I would say that for the experience of Walla Walla University, despite all the other good things about it, that was really what made it what it was for me in my experience. It was the people. It was the community. So that's one thing. And I think you could say something very similar of the place I went to next. After I graduated from Walla Walla University, I took an associate pastoral position at a church in the Bay Area called the Sunnyvale SDA Church. And the story there is much the same. I loved the area. I loved the Bay Area of California. It was a fascinating place to be near San Francisco. All these major tech companies headquartered there, all the interesting things going on, the great food to eat, and all those wonderful things. But at the end of the day, those things are, I suppose you could say, kind of peripheral. Without the community that I found there, with the church members and the friends and the relationships, it just wouldn't be the same. So for the time I spent in Sunnyvale, I would say much the same about the time I spent in Walla Walla. It was wonderful because of the people. The church members were kind and welcoming and open and forgiving and willing to help me in any and every way that they could. And that's why I love that place so much. And then finally, I suppose, I will turn my attention to Loma Linda. Loma Linda is a place where I grew up. I was here from the time I was born until I went to college. And then, between the time I spent at college in Sunnyvale, I was away from Loma Linda for 7 years. I didn't move back until after Sunnyvale, and then coming back, the experience was very similar. I love the area. It's home. I grew up here. I'm familiar with the town. I'm familiar with the streets. I'm familiar with the restaurants. And so that's a cool thing. It's wonderful. But at the end of the day, none of that makes a huge difference if there's no community. So coming back here to the people that I know and love, to the friends that I've had for a lifetime, was a wonderful experience. Because that, at the end of the day, I suppose, is what it's all about. Community is a big deal in our lives. In fact, if we think about the gospel and the things that Jesus says in the Bible, I think one important thing that he talks about and that he lives out is that idea of community. You see, the walk with Christ although we should have a personal relationship with him, although we should pray and we should read our Bibles and we should do all of those things, none of those things are complete. You see, Christianity and the following of Christ Jesus is not meant to do alone. Community is a very important, a key part to our walk with God. After all, Jesus himself spent the grand majority of his ministerial time on this earth, the 3 years he spent from about the ages of 30 to 33, with people. He had his disciples. He had the crowds who followed him around. No matter where he went, it seemed like he was always with people. And that's a major part of following Christ is the community, because this is not a path we can walk alone. We have other brothers and sisters in Christ Jesus who walk this path along with us, because there are times, doubtless, where things are going to get difficult. And that right there is why we have community. Well, today we're going to read a text in Acts about that. In fact, if you have a Bible with you, I would love to invite you to turn to the 4th chapter of the book of Acts. Now, we're going to read from here in a few moments, but let's take a look at the context. Let's see what's going on here in Acts at this moment before we read the text. So, this is early on in the book of Acts, which also means it's early on in the history of the Christian church. At the beginning of chapter 4, Peter and John have stood before the Sanhedrin. The believers have prayed. There's been a lot going on. People, doubtless, are afraid. There are many dangers that threaten the church this early on, close to its inception. There are people, there are government agencies, there are all sorts of things that would like to destroy the church. Why? Perhaps because they see it as a threat. They see Jesus Christ and his followers as people who may do them harm. Whether or not that is true, I suppose we can judge for ourselves. But that is how the Christian church is seen. So, here we are in the book of Acts. We're going to read Acts 4, 32 to 37. And as we read that, we're going to see what's going on here. So let's read it together. It says this: all the believers were in one heart and mind. No one claimed that any of their possessions was their own, but they shared everything they had. With great power, the apostles continued to testify to the resurrection of the Lord Jesus. And God's grace was so powerfully at work in them all that there were no needy persons among them. For from time to time, those who owned land or houses sold them, brought the money from the sales, and put it at the apostles' feet, and it was distributed to anyone who had need. Joseph, a Levite from Cyprus, whom the apostles called Barnabas, which means son of encouragement, sold a field he owned and brought the money and put it at the apostles' feet. So as you think about the idea of community and what that means, the early church has some lessons for us to learn. Now, there are many things we could talk about regarding community, but I want to suggest to you that in this text in particular, there are three specific things about community which are talked about here and that are important. So, we're going to look at those three things. First is unity. Now, unity is an important thing, and I think here in this text that Luke, the author of Acts, is talking about the unity of heart and mind. In fact, you can see it in the first sentence there in verse 32. It says what? It says, all the believers were one in heart and mind. So what does it mean to be unified of heart and mind? Well, I want to suggest to you a couple of things here. Unity of heart and mind can sound like kind of an ethereal concept. It can sound kind of abstract and difficult to define. But despite that, I want to note one particularly important thing when we talk about unity in heart and mind. You see, I think that means that as Christians and as followers of Christ, that we love one another. That does not mean that we always agree on every single minute detail, because that would be ridiculous. No two people, and especially no group of people, always agree on everything. Because if they did, somebody is not truly voicing their opinion, somebody is being walked on like a carpet, and somebody is being thought of as less than. So here we have unity of heart and mind, and that is an attitude that they hold toward one another, toward a greater goal, toward something bigger than themselves. So that's what we have, unity of heart and mind. It does not mean that they are always agreeing on everything. In May of 2011, Osama bin Laden was killed by the Navy SEALs. Now, the mission that accomplished that has largely been shrouded in mystery, although since that time, articles and books and films have come out that have depicted that time. Well, I want to refer briefly to an article by Eric Greitens, I believe found either in the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal. He is a Navy SEAL who talks about what it means to be a Navy SEAL and how they are constantly unified toward a greater mind and goal. You see, to become a Navy SEAL is not easy. It's not something you can simply do. It's not something anybody can do. It is a very difficult, grueling, and rough experience. As Greitens puts it, everybody goes through training called BUDS. And in BUDS training, they have 1 week in particular called Hell Week. Now, during this week, it is taken to an extreme. You see, these SEALs are kept up, or these potential SEALs are kept up for almost a week straight, doing extremely strenuous physical activity. And as you can imagine, that not only plays with your physical ability, but it also plays with your emotions and your mental capacity. As Greitens says, there are only about 10 to 20% of the people who enter this who ultimately finish. 80 to 90% of the people who try fail out. They quit before it's done because it is simply too much for them to take. And Greitens says, it's interesting to see because you look out there and you watch these people that have come to do this and you notice the types of people that have come. And there are some stereotypical guys that have come to try out for this who think they can make it. You have on your one hand, I suppose, your gym rats or your meatheads, the people who have spent hours upon hours in the gym and have big arms and big chests and big legs, and they think that a show of strength is simply how big their muscles are. But often, they fail out. Or, he says, you have your track stars and your swimmers and your athletes and the people who have been told throughout their careers that they are the star, they're the number one, they're the winners, they can do this. But they also fail out often, and they just can't finish. Greitens says it's interesting to note who does finish. Sometimes it's the most timid or scared-looking people that make it to the end. Those whose teeth chatter just looking at the ocean in Coronado, California, in which they will have to swim for hours on end. Those who are throwing up on runs near the beginning of training. Those who simply can't seem to keep up. Many times, those are the ones who make it. And he says there is a quality that separates those who graduate and make it from those who don't. Greitens says, it's simply the will to continue on and to help your brothers next to you. It's those who put self aside and then instead reach for a larger goal in the context of a team. Because if you try to do it by yourself, you will never make it. But, he says, if you have a team around you, people that care about you and people about whom you care, things are different. And I guess that is kind of what Luke is saying here in Acts. He's saying we want to be unified of heart and mind. We're not going to be the type of people who stand here and look to the left and look to the right and then don't care about the people they see and say, it's me and I'm going to win. He says we are a Christian community. Our brothers and sisters in Jesus Christ are important, and if we are ever going to reach the goal for which we strive so deeply, we need one another. That's the reality of living the Christian life within the context of a community. It cannot be done without the help of brothers and sisters in Christ. After all, each of us individually are not strong enough to do this. We will have bad days. We will have days where we fall. We will have days where we mess things up. And we need others to come alongside us and pick us up and move forward. So that's the first quality. And there are two more left to go. So first we've had unity. Unity of heart and mind. But then we move on to generosity. In this text here, it's also very clear that the early Christians here are generous. In fact, you can see it there. Continuing on in verse 32, it says, "No one claimed that any of their possessions was their own, but they shared everything they had." It said even that there were no needy persons among them, for from time to time those who owned land or houses sold them, brought the money from the sales and put it at the apostles' feet. And it was distributed to everybody who had need. Generosity. Generosity is the second quality that is important to a Christian community. Former NFL linebacker and author David Simmons tells a story about a time when he took his kids to the mall. He said he took his two young children, his son and his daughter, to the mall. And he was going looking for things. And when they got there, he said he saw one of those huge, like Peterbilt tractor trailers there that had a portable petting zoo. And he said they'd erected these portable fences. They'd put probably down an inch of sawdust with all these small little animals that the kids could go and pet. So Simmons says, as his two kids were so excited to see these animals, he flipped them each a quarter, and then he headed off to go shopping inside Sears. Well, he was looking around, picking certain items, looking at different things, deciding what he needed to buy, when he noticed that behind him was his young daughter, and she was following him around and looked doughy-eyed and sad. And naturally, he was surprised to see her. He thought she would be tremendously excited to be taking part in the petting zoo. And he looked down at her and asked, "What happened? What are you doing here?" And she looked up at him and she said, "Well, Daddy, the petting zoo cost 50 cents, so I gave my quarter to Brandon so he could go in." Isn't that the way we should act? Isn't that the way we should be toward our brothers and sisters in Christ? Is that not the type of generosity we should display toward those who have not enough? Toward the people who are marginalized or downcast? Toward the people who we don't think about, who live kind of on the peripheries of society? That is who we are called to be as part of the community of believers. We are called to be generous. Now, I don't want you to misunderstand me here in this context. We are called to be generous out of choice. This is not some sort of communist society where we are legally bound to give to certain amounts of things and whatever. But what Jesus is asking for is for us to be voluntarily generous to those around us. He says, listen, if you are going to be part of the Christian community of Christ here, especially in this early church, I want you to be generous, because there will always be people who have less than you. And that means that it is on you to give. Give of your money, give of your time, give of something that you have, because everybody here needs something. So, that is the second lesson here in this Christian community that we need to think about and talk about. So first, we've had unity of heart and mind. We are banded together for a common goal in Christ Jesus. We need our brothers and our sisters to continue to help us push us along this path as we continue to walk it ourselves. Unity. Secondly, we've got generosity. We will forever be surrounded by people who have less than we do. And because of that, we are called to be generous. We are called to give to one another. We are called to give of our financial resources, our time, the things that we have more than other people. Generosity. But then we have got a third and final thing of which this text speaks. Here it talks about testimony. And testimony is also important. Testimony is the practice of sharing the good news, sharing what Jesus has done in your life and sharing what Jesus has done in my life. Testimony is an important thing. In fact, you can see an example of it right here. Down in verse 36, there is Joseph, a Levite from Cyprus, whom the apostles called Barnabas, as the text says. And what he does is he sells a field that he owns and he brings the money and puts it at the apostles' feet. So here we've got testimony. Someone doing something and then sharing the good news of Jesus Christ and saying, listen, Christ has done these great things for me and I will pass them along to you. Testimony is a big deal. Testimony is sharing with one another. It reminds me of a story told of a young and new salesman. And as the story goes, this young salesman was excited for a big sale. He had made the pitch, he had done a good job, and he had done everything he could to sell his client on a product. Now, as I'm sure you're well aware, clients don't always buy the products that are being sold to them. But he had worked hard, and he had great hopes that this client would buy. Well, as time went on, it became more and more apparent that the client probably was not going to buy. And finally, he made contact, and the client said, no, I'm sorry, not this time. We're not going to be buying today. Well, naturally, the young salesman was pretty disappointed and pretty down. And he went in, and he was talking to his boss, and he was bemoaning the fact that he had lost such a large sale. When he said something to his boss, he said, well, I guess this proves that you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. And the boss kind of sat there and chuckled and said, well, you know, it's not really your job to make the horse drink. It is your job to make the horse thirsty. You see, we, as those who share testimony, can't make people accept Jesus Christ. We can't do that. It's not our job to make the horse drink, proverbially speaking. It is our job to make the horse thirsty. By the sharing of our testimony and by telling others what Jesus has done in your life and my life, we give people this sense of thirst, a thirst for something greater, something more. And that's what we are to do with our testimony. We're not supposed to make people drink, but perhaps we are supposed to make them thirsty. So we've had three things here. Three different things that are part of being in a Christian community. First, we've talked about unity. Unity of heart and mind. The unity of a people toward a greater goal in Christ Jesus. Unity of brothers and sisters in Christ in walking a path that we are not meant to walk alone. And secondly, we've talked about generosity. Giving to those who have less than us. Giving to people who have need. Looking at the marginalized and the downtrodden and the outcasts. And saying, listen, I have something you don't. So allow me to share with you the things that I have. Being generous. And then thirdly and finally, we have looked at testimony. Testimony, sharing the good news of Jesus Christ, telling others the great things that Christ has done in our lives. Each of these facets of Christian community are important. And Christian community itself is important. As I think about this, as I think about what it means to be part of that community, there is a poem that comes to mind. You see, it's easy to think that some of these things may not apply to us. It's easy to kind of be like, oh, well, perhaps that's meant for somebody else. Perhaps this whole community thing isn't that big of a deal. I can walk this path alone. After all, I've got my own spirituality. I like to do my own things. But that's not a healthy outlook to take That's not right. I'm going to read this poem to you. It's entitled No Man is an Island by poet John Donne. And it goes like this. No man is an island entire of itself. Every man is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. If a clod be washed away by the sea, Europe is the less, as well as if a promontory were, as well as if a manor of thy friends or of thine own were. Any man's death diminishes me, because I am involved in mankind, and therefore never send to know for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for thee. No man is an island. Nobody does this alone. It reminds me of a story of a mouse in a farmhouse. And one day, as the mouse in the farmhouse was looking around, he happened to catch a glimpse of something that was going on in the home of the farmer. And he saw there that the farmer had set up a mousetrap. And naturally, the mouse was terrified. So he ran into the farmhouse and looked at the chicken and said, "Oh, chicken, they have set up a mousetrap in the house. We are in trouble." And the chicken looked down at the mouse and said, "I am not in trouble, because a mousetrap is not going to catch me." And so the mouse ran along and talked to the pig and said, "Oh, pig, we are in trouble, for the farmer has set up a mousetrap in the house." And the pig said, "Do you really think a mousetrap will make that much of a difference to me? I am large and you are small. A mousetrap will do nothing for me." And so the mouse ran along to the cow and said to the cow, "Oh, cow, help me, for there is this mousetrap in the house and it could kill me." And the cow said, "Oh, well, I'll pray for you. I'll think about you." And the mouse was distressed. Well, later on, the next night, the sound of the mousetrap went off. And the farmer's wife went to look and see what had happened that night. But it was dark and she could not see, and had not realized that the mousetrap had not trapped a mouse, but had trapped instead a venomous snake, and it bit her. Well, she became very ill, and you know what's good for illness is good chicken soup. So the farmer went out to the farmhouse, and you know what he got for chicken soup? Well, he got the chicken. But she was not getting better, so the family came to show their support, and he thought, well, one chicken is not enough for this family, so then he prepared the pig and ended its life. Well, finally, the wife's condition worsened, and finally she died, and he said, well, we're going to need a lot of food for this funeral, so I suppose we are going to have to serve this cow. And so he killed the cow and made beef out of it and served it at the funeral. I suppose this lesson goes to show that even though one thing may not matter to each and every one of us individually, it matters to all of us. We are a community of Christ.